You are listening to the Reformanda Initiative podcast, where we analyze and discuss Roman Catholic theology and practice from an evangelical perspective. We're really excited to launch our first episode of this brand new podcast by the Reformanda Initiative. I am your co-host, Clay Kennard. I'm sitting here with my brothers and colleagues, Reed Carr and Leonardo De Chirico. And gentlemen, why don't you introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Yes, thank you, Clay. My name is Leonardo. I'm the pastor of a church here in Rome and also the director of the Reformanda Initiative.
And my name is Reed Carr. I've been in Rome, Italy for 10 years now. I'm originally from the Atlanta area, married with 3 little girls, one on the way. Not sure if it's a girl or boy, but we have one on the way. And I am the associate director of the Reformanda Initiative and also a pastor of a church here in Rome.
And I'm here living in Rome with my wife and our 4 kids as well, and we're not expecting any more at Reed that I know of. But I'm the communications director for the Reformanda Initiative. And so, like I said, we're excited to launch this podcast. This is not our first attempt at this recording here.
Yeah, a quick note to our listeners. We hope to provide you a quality product and as far as the content that we present to you. We've realized that we don't really know what we're doing yet with the recording aspect of it and the logistics aspect of it. Clay has worked really hard to help us figure that out, but we got great equipment. It's pretty funny. Just a quick story. We had actually Leo took a picture of us one day when we were recording, and one of Clay's friends, who is a sound editor, what is he? A sound engineer?
He's a tech engineer.
Tech engineer saw the picture and said, "Well, you might want to turn your microphones around." Yeah. We had them backwards or upside down or something.
Yeah, they were picking the echo right up off of the table in front of us.
So this is at least take 5 at least, and it's still going to be imperfect. So
it's a Reformanda thing.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Sempre Reformanda.
So
yes.
we appreciate your patience with our inability to do this, but we do hope that we provide some good content, and we do believe the content is worth your while.
So, that being said, what are we actually doing here? Why are we doing this podcast?
Well, we hope to provide a resource to the evangelical church on Roman Catholic theology and practice. Again, I've been here for 10 years. Of course, Leo's been here his whole life. Clay's been here for many years himself. And it's one thing that is very obvious is that a lot of people who come to visit just don't understand Roman Catholic theology and practice and don't have a good understanding of it all, and can't, would certainly say, well, I know there's some things that are different about it. I know there's some weird things about Mary, for example, or this or that, but wouldn't really be able to articulate well why, for example, we're here planting evangelical churches. If basically Roman Catholicism is Christianity, it's faithful to the gospel with just some maybe bizarre aspects to it that we can ignore and then agree on the things we agree on, then I don't really see a need for us to be here planting churches. But we are here because we do believe in the fact that the Roman Catholic system is a severely flawed theological system, and we want to explain why that is and why we're here doing what we do.
All right, thanks, Reed. So maybe you're listening to what Reed just said, and you would say, okay, I agree with that, but I don't really understand why. Or maybe you disagree. Well, we hope that this podcast will challenge your belief, because oftentimes people would say, well, we understand there are some differences between Roman Catholics and evangelicals, but they don't understand specifically what those are, or if they do, they just view them as kind of isolated doctrines in which we disagree with Roman Catholics. And so we're going to try to use this podcast to explain where we differ and why those differences are much broader and have a much larger impact.
And certainly it comes down to the gospel. Now, this is all about the gospel of Jesus Christ and how it's presented in Scripture. And so we want to be good stewards with what we've been given from God and defend the gospel in a sense. And so that would be certainly an important aspect of what we're doing and hope to do. Leo is the director, as we said, of the Reformanda Initiative, and there was a series of events, correct me if I'm wrong, Leo, that led to kind of the idea of the Reformanda Initiative, why it's important, why it's needed. So tell us a little bit about the Reformanda Initiative and how it came about to be.
Yeah. It came through the growing realization that on a global scale, there was no platform, no initiative, no attempt in the theological evangelical world to address Roman Catholicism and to focus on that topic. We have lots of initiatives in mission, in theological education, in training, but although Roman Catholicism is a reality that is present everywhere, and from north to south, from east to west, there was no serious attempt to deal with it. And moreover, since we're living in the so-called ecumenical era or season, the ability to discern what is at stake with Roman Catholicism from an evangelical perspective was becoming more and more fuzzy and superficial. So the Reformanda Initiative wants to contribute to the evangelical theological discourse and to help not only evangelical theologians, although we have some programs specifically designed for evangelical scholars, but also the evangelical public in general to build and to be aware of what is at stake with Roman Catholicism by way of this podcast, by way of our articles, videos, conferences, seminars, publications, books, and so on, providing a variety of resources for evangelicals to become more acquainted with Roman Catholicism and more aware of what is at stake with it.
So, as far as you're aware, there's not any other initiative like it?
No, nothing of the sort, nothing intentional, ongoing, and thorough in the same way we try to do.
So who else is part of the Reformanda Initiative team?
Well, we had Dr. Greg Hallison, who is professor of Christian theology at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and also Professor Mike Reeves, who is president of the Union School of Theology in the UK, and myself, and you, Reed, and Clay, and others are supporting the initiative from different parts of the world. We have supporters and friends and colleagues in Australia, Latin America, Europe, the US, almost everywhere from around the world. There are people who are actually seeing that what we do, try to do, is important and are supporting it.
So why would we need support from people from every part of the world?
Because Roman Catholicism is everywhere, and it takes different colors, different shades, different emphasis, and so in order to grasp it theologically, but also sociologically, culturally, historically, we need a larger table and different people sharing their experiences. Of course, we have a theological task to do. We believe that Roman Catholicism is diverse, but at the same time is a unified whole. And so in order to have a better grasp, we need more voices around the table, ultimately converging on the same basic theological understanding of what Roman Catholicism is all about.
When you say that Roman Catholicism in different parts of the world takes on different colors, different shades, would it be accurate to say, for example, in America it takes on a more evangelical flavor because of the evangelical fluence in the States, maybe in South America, more animistic flavor in Rome, where we are, certainly more traditional,
and
And so that-
political
and so for
and
that
cultural.
reason, for that reason, we need different voices from different
Yeah.
parts of the world because of the different expression.
Yeah.
The Lord's really been good to us as an organization, as a ministry, to provide people in those various contexts, and we pray He would continue to grow that to an Asian context as well, for example. But here we are sitting in the city of Rome, and perhaps our listeners can hear a European siren going off in the background. It's because we are literally in the very heart of the city of Rome, in the historical district, not far from the Colosseum, not far from City Hall, not far from St. Peter's. So what does being in Rome give us? What advantage do we have being here?
Yeah, especially considering what we just talked about, that Roman Catholicism does take on different expressions wherever it is in the world. But what advantage does it provide us being in the heart of Roman Catholicism itself?
Well, Roman Catholicism is Roman Catholicism. So Rome is always involved in what Catholicism is. And so Rome is the core, the key, the heart, the center of this church, which is also a worldview, which is also an institution, which is also a system. And so seeing the system from the very heart of it gives an added value to our work, because we are next to the Vatican, next to the Pope, next to the best and largest pontifical universities, next to the centers of Catholic power. So we have the possibility to look at it in a way from within, and so trying to discern how the system works and how it is connected.
Often in conversations with evangelical friends, for example, in a North American context, when we are critical of Roman Catholicism, we're often accused of being maybe just sensitive to Roman Catholicism because we're here in Rome. My question for you would be, is that a fair assessment? Or my response typically is, because we are here at the very heart of Roman Catholicism, where we can see the developments firsthand, we are the people that should be listened to whenever we address concerns in the evangelical context. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that Roman Catholic, we're discussing Roman Catholic theology and practice from an evangelical perspective. And Roman Catholic theology is Roman Catholic theology wherever it is in the world. It expresses itself in different ways, and that's one of the frustrating aspects of Roman Catholic theology, is that it has the ability to do that. It's able to be both this and that at the same time. But it's important to draw that distinction between Roman Catholic theology, not Roman Catholics, but Roman Catholic theology, and how it expresses itself and how it expresses itself in practice as well.
Right, so our criticisms impact people who adhere to Roman Catholic theology, but we love Roman Catholics, so it's never obviously an attack or a criticism of the individual. We're addressing, like you said, Reed, the Roman Catholic theology in the way it is implemented and seen here and throughout the world.
And it's important to make this point about addressing Roman Catholic theology and practice, because we live in a day in which to disagree with one another is almost to say we can't have a conversation, we can't talk. We're trying to seek unity, and anything that could be hinted at as harming that unity needs to be cast aside, and let's don't talk about that. Especially Pope Francis is he sees an important part of Roman Catholicism today is ecumenical dialogue, interreligious dialogue, and so here we are talking about, which one could say, and one could criticize, you're quibbling over small theological issues that really aren't important. I was just listening, in fact, to a story the other day about a doctor in the UK. His name is Dr. David Macareth, and he's in Birmingham, and he was fired basically for not agreeing to use gender pronouns, right? And he cited his faith in Jesus Christ as a reason for not being able to do that. So there's even in today's world, I mean, there's big issues, religious liberty issues at stake, And so where we would, together with Roman Catholics, have a Judeo-Christian worldview and be in agreement that that is not okay. We need to have religious liberty. Here we are talking about differences between evangelicals and Roman Catholics. So how do we address that criticism of, hey, look, we got bigger fish to fry in a sense, and we're worrying about small things? How do we respond to that criticism, which we have received?
Well, it's certainly true that we are not against dialogue as such, and we're not against forms of cooperation if we rightly understand what we are talking about. We are concerned with a superficial view of Christian unity and what it means to be united. There has been a consistent trend in present-day theology and also church practice to downplay the significance of truth in grounding our unity, and so making unity more of an emotional union rather than something that stems from biblical truth. And but if we don't have a biblical ground, that unity is not Christian unity. It is going to be a different kind of unity, and this is what actually happening in much of the present day attempts to bring about unity. So our service, what we try to do, is at the service of Christian unity, because you don't have Christian unity unless it is grounded on biblical truth. And if it is not grounded on biblical truth, although it may present itself as Christian unity, it is not. It is something different. And plus, given the fact that after Vatican II, the Second Vatican Council, 1962, 1965, the Catholic Church has significantly nuanced and articulated in a more suffused way what she understands unity to be. We have to be aware of those things. We have to be aware of what is at stake when Rome speaks of unity. Speaks of unity among Christians, among Christians and Muslims, among Christians and non-believing human beings. What does it mean? And so something that we'll try to do is to be at the service of helping people to appreciate what is Christian unity. Certainly for the sake of dialogue. We are in Rome, we are in constant dialogue with Catholic theologians, Catholic priests, Catholic faithful, Catholic people, and we are not against at all, but we want to do it on the basis of truth and love, and not only on the basis of a shallow understanding of a humanistic sense of friendship alone.
I think that's an important distinction to make, because we need to be very clear about what is unifying us and what unity is and what it is exactly that we are being united by. Because in today's ecumenical dialogue, in this interfaith, interreligious dialogue, to have those types of conversations and a conversation of any types of depth, the gospel as presented in the Bible either has to be completely removed or way watered down. Because you can't talk about an interfaith dialogue, you can't talk about salvation in Christ alone, through faith alone, through grace alone. It doesn't have a place there. So you are relegated to talk about social issues, climate issues, and that's what we see. So it's certainly not about a closure to dialogue, as Leo was saying. We're open to dialogue, but we need to be clear about what we're talking about and what, you always hear that example of, well, Christ prayed for unity. No, in the priestly prayer in John 17, he prayed, he wants unity. Well, yes, but what kind of unity? Certainly not one that comes at the price of the gospel, expense of the gospel in any way whatsoever. We have to reject that type of unity. There is a place for that type of dialogue and for that type of collaboration, but we need to be clear about the gospel and what's at stake here. So we want to be clear. we often hear a lot of times when we talk about Catholicism or we talk about disagreements about it, we'll hear someone respond in a certain way. Well, I have this Catholic friend who says this. He doesn't believe that. He wouldn't agree with that. Well, this priest that I went to, he said this, and that's fine. We're not talking about Roman Catholics. We're talking about what the church actually teaches. So that's the distinction to make there is Roman Catholic theology and practice, and we do have an issue with Roman Catholic theology as it's presented in its dogma and in its doctrine. We believe that it's a severely flawed system in need of radical biblical reformation, and so that's what we're addressing, and that's what we want to talk about. So we're love dialogue, love Roman Catholics, but we do have an issue with what the Roman Catholic Church teaches in respect to the biblical gospel and biblical truth.
Yeah, we want to help evangelicals also understand the definition of words. So you gave the example of an evangelical who has a Roman Catholic friend, or maybe even heard their priest say that you must be born again in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. And so a lot of times we use the same language, but we mean completely different things. And so conversation, dialogue, and seeking to really understand what is meant by the words that we use between evangelicals and Roman Catholic theology is crucial. And so we pray that this podcast, that our ministry would be able to help achieve a goal of clarity, because we do see a lack of discernment, especially I would say from a North American evangelical context. There seems to be this blind spot for evangelical Christians that doesn't only impact, I think, the faithful in our church or even our pastors, but we even find within, I think, our theological institutions as well, a lack of understanding Roman Catholicism as a theological system.
Certainly throughout this podcast, that's something we want to do, is we want to clarify terminology. We want to clarify vocabulary, because this is where really you see a lot of the problems arise. Is you sit down with a Roman Catholic and the vocabulary is very similar: salvation, Jesus Christ, redemption, justification, whatever it may be, grace. We talk about the same things, we have the same vocabulary, but there is a very different definition and understanding of those words that are tied to those words. And it takes time to get into it, but the differences are very important.
Yeah, they're all related to the system. And so the way in which they are connected to one another, and they make sense in a certain framework. We're going to address Roman Catholicism as a theological framework, and then that will help us to even understand the different aspects, different doctrines, different terms, different practices, different devotions. And there's been a lack of evangelical investment on understanding Roman Catholicism. If you look at the literature, in the last 40 years, there has been a lack of books, for instance, trying to articulate an evangelical understanding of Rome. And whereas the ecumenical engagement of many evangelicals has grown a lot, there has been a lack of theological investigation. And so this has led us to an unbalanced situation whereby many evangelicals are basically buying into this ecumenical view whereby the Catholic Church is yet another denomination next to the Baptists, the Methodists, the Lutherans, etc. And at the same time, this has not been accompanied by a sustained attempt to work through the theological issues. So this is an attempt to be a resource, to be a tool for evangelicals not to give up to this ecumenical, shallow, low-key, superficial approach, but to be truthful to the gospel and also truthful to dialogue, because real dialogue always is meaningful dialogue, not dialogue driven by emotional friendship alone, but dialogue driven by the truth. the truth of the gospel.
Yeah, so we hope that, just as Leo said, this is a resource to the evangelical church who's trying to understand Roman Catholicism better. And because, as Clay mentioned before, he mentioned rightly so that there's, at least from our opinion, a blind spot in the evangelical world on Roman Catholic theology and what it means and how to understand it. So this has just been an introductory episode on what the Reformanda Initiative is and what we hope to accomplish with it. We hope to provide the church with a resource and to provide the church a way to understand Roman Catholic theology and practice. So, in fact, the next two episodes, we're going to talk just about that. Leo was talking about understanding it as a system. But Clay, remind us of how our listeners, if this podcast or what we talked about today raised questions, doubts, concerns, how could they contact us? How can they email us? How can they follow us? What about when we have new episodes come out?
Well, first you can find us online. Visit us at www.reformandainitiative.org. There you'll find helpful resources, articles. You'll find information about upcoming conferences, and you'll also find a contact form. But you can also find us on social media, Facebook at Reformanda Initiative, and also on Twitter at Reformanda Rome.
And so on Twitter, you'll announce the upcoming episodes. I don't know if you just said that. Or...
Yep, so be sure you subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media for the latest updates.